The Indiana Pacers proved everyone wrong. They shocked the world, and they stuck it to those haters. As last year, making the Eastern Conference Finals, many people were ready to write off this team going into the next year. They only got there because of injuries. They were lucky to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but many were wrong about that Pacers team as they heard all those discussions of people putting them in the play-in, not even a top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference, and proved everyone wrong with being a top 5 seed. Then they proved everyone wrong by having clutch performances versus Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard to beat the Milwaukee Bucks. Then they went in and took on the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and even though they were dealing with injuries, they still stuck it to them and beat the Cleveland Cavaliers and pushed on to play the New York Knicks and once again beat them. And after making it to the NBA Finals in a position that no one thought they were going to make it to, people once again doubted them, having the Pacers losing in 5 or 6, and they forced it to a Game 7, in which they ultimately were 1 game away, and which a devastating injury basically cost them that chance of winning a championship, because if Tyrese Haliburton is healthy, you could even argue the fact that they win yesterday's game. And with that all being said, the Pacers are still a juggernaut. They're still ready, and they're still going to be one of these top-tier teams in the Eastern Conference for not only just next year, but for the next couple seasons as well. And I'm very excited to break down this Indiana Pacers offseason breakdown, going over what they should do gearing up for next season to once again prove everyone wrong. Now, if you guys are a Pacers fan, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Let me know how you guys feel about the season. If you think I did the Pacers some justice and what they should be doing and working towards to building this culture once again to bring them back to the finals in the future. If you do want to check out the other videos on this channel looking at every other team in the offseason breakdown, definitely go check that out as we are going into our last 2 teams gearing up for the draft, today with the Pacers and tomorrow for the Thunder. So besides that, every team has been covered. So if your team is definitely on that list, definitely go check it out to hear what I had to say about your team. Without further ado, let's dive in and let's talk about the Pacers. So like I mentioned, Indiana Pacers, a very, very fought-out season this year. And once again, proved everyone wrong, proved all those doubters, as a lot of people, not myself, but a lot of people thought the Pacers were going to be maybe a 7 or an 8 seed. Getting lucky last year, dealing with some injuries, they felt that the Bucks, the Sixers, the Knicks, the Celtics, the Cavs, maybe even the Magic and Pistons and the Heat would all be above those teams. But the Pacers proved a lot of them wrong, finishing top 4 in the Eastern Conference, and then getting revenge versus Milwaukee. And even though they ran into some injured teams, right? Damian Lillard got hurt versus the Bucks. The Cavs were dealing with injuries with Darius Garland, with DeAndre Hunter, and even the Knicks were dealing with some injuries as well. The Pacers proved everyone wrong, not in just beating those teams, but also having clutch games, multiple game winners, multiple times where they feel like they were counted out and doubted with seconds left in the game and were able to come back to get these big time victories. You have to give the credit to this Indiana Pacers team, even in Game 7 yesterday, right, where no Tyrese Haliburton after he tore his Achilles, this team was still fighting, still crawling back, and even after the Thunder had leads of up towards to 20 points, the Pacers were having runs led by TJ McConnell, led by Benedict Mathurin, to really, really fight their way and show that they never give up. And that's what you have to respect as an NBA fan. As a neutral NBA fan, you have to appreciate this Indiana Pacers squad for the heart, for the grit that they put out there, and not only just that, for how underrated this team truly really is. Going into the playoffs, obviously Tyrese Haliburton was voted the most overrated player across the NBA. Pascal Siakam has an NBA championship, but has not gotten his flowers over these last couple of seasons, especially with being in Indiana, in Toronto, some smaller markets. And it is clear that Miles Turner is a big piece for this team, alongside other key guys like Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin, Benedict Mathurin, and all of the above. The Pacers currently are sitting at $168 million underneath that tax threshold, but have some key free agents and have a big offseason to get underway. Miles Turner being the biggest, obviously the longest tenured Indiana Pacer on the roster, had been there for over a decade, finally got this team to the NBA Finals, and I do see a guy in Miles Turner, regardless of the money that he'd be getting paid out there, coming back to Indiana. They have his bird rights. They have the chance to give him the best extension. And even though Indiana doesn't want to get into these luxury tax aprons, right, even though they don't want to explore that kind of extra monetary spending, they said that they would be willing to do it for a guy in Miles Turner, and I see that happening 100%. But besides that, that's where the Pacers run into some problems here, as they have a lot of key players that they can realistically run, but now with Tyrese Halliburton being out for the entire season, what do you particularly do with this core and with this team in trying to build it? Halliburton obviously now out with that Achilles injury, so what does that gear up for the Pacers, and how could they potentially shed some salaries or keep some guys to really build out this roster? Well, let's dive in and explore some players that I think could be traded from the Pacers potentially this offseason. So the first player I'd like to talk about is Aaron Nesmith, and I don't necessarily think Aaron Nesmith could get traded, as he had some great moments here in this series for Indiana throughout the entire playoffs, where he came up clutch, specifically in Game 1 versus the New York Knicks, where he just let it loose, and that's where the Indiana Pacers were able to come back and steal that game over in Madison Square Garden. But besides that, Nesmith had some great performances where he proved to this Indiana team that he could be a solid 3-and-D wing for them. The only question is with Indiana is obviously they just traded their 23rd overall pick this year to get back their 2026 first rounder. They traded away for Pascal Siakam, which was then flipped to New Orleans. But besides the fact that allowed the Pacers to now have their 2026, 2028, and 2030 picks tradable, which allows them to use those picks with some of these assets to maybe go out and get some upgrades. Now, with them kind of being a second apron team and trying to, I guess, analyze how they're going to keep this roster competitive with also keeping most of their core intact, that's something that I could have seen kind of go down the line if Tyrese was going to be healthy. With Tyrese being injured, we may see this Pacers team just dive low into the tax and try to just keep a solid core of stars ready to go so that they can still be competent in this Eastern Conference and maybe even get back to a spot here in the NBA Finals. Now, obviously, a guy in Nesmith could definitely stay. If they find themselves an upgrade where they could use one or two of those picks to get it, I could see the team pulling the trigger. But if not, then I see them keeping Nesmith. Now, the next player I want to talk about is Jarace Walker, as Walker was drafted as a lottery pick for the Indiana Pacers, I believe number 7 here in this NBA draft. And unfortunately, hasn't been able to pan out or be able to showcase his ability with this Pacers team, because he's been logjammed behind a bunch of guys. If we want to look at this rotation, right? Miles Turner's there. Pascal Siakam's there. Isaiah Jackson was out for this season, but he was there playing over him as well. They also had James Wiseman, who was playing for this team as well for the Indiana Pacers. They had an abundance of bigs and a bunch of players that were playing in that rotation. Another one to mention is Obi Toppin. And for Jarace Walker, he has been able to break into that mold and find himself a really key spot with this team. Now, he's had some flashes. He's had some moments where he has looked good, to where Pacers fans obviously do not want to trade him, and I understand why. He still has that untapped potential. At Houston in college, he was very dominant, and I think he could have translated already to the league and been an impactful player if the Pacers actually gave him the opportunity, and that's maybe where they do consider things. Now, they could look to trade a guy in Obi Toppin, who kind of similarly plays that role, makes a little bit more money, but as we saw throughout the playoffs, Toppin played a key, vital role as a role player for this Indiana Pacers squad, and maybe they feel like a guy like Obi Toppin is a little bit more needed as a veteran for this Pacers team to be ready to go, and that's why they look to trade a guy like Jarace Walker, or maybe they do feel like a guy like Jarace Walker is ready to step up for that moment and become their next Obi Toppin, and they look to move off Obi Toppin to help shed some salary, make it a little bit easier to give Miles Turner that extension, but also still being a solid playoff team. That's where I think this real true decision comes in with the Indiana Pacers here, and truly deciding, do you go young? Do you still stay with this young core? With Tyrese being out, do you take a little bit of a step back and develop a guy in Jarace Walker, maybe move off a key guy in Obi Toppin who made himself a bigger role player this season and could on some other teams across the league? Or do you trade a guy in Jarace Walker and keep Obi Toppin, as you want to still stay as a competent playoff high-level team and go into potentially, when Tyrese Halliburton does come back, a nice little run with Obi Toppin, once again being a nice little running mate alongside Halliburton, which had some success this playoffs. And the last player that I wanted to discuss possibly being traded is Bennedict Mathurin. Now, personally, I am a Benny believer. I always have been, ever back in his days at the U of A. And personally, with Tyrese Halliburton getting injured, I think that this is a better chance for Benny to really open himself and prove to the Pacers that he can be that guy for many reasons. The one concern with Bennedict Mathurin in this Pacers team is he needs the ball in his hands, and we've seen that multiple times, right? When Bennedict Mathurin has been able to get hot for this Pacers team in this playoffs, it's when he's able to play iso ball. It's when he's able to take over. It's when he's able to command that sort of 5 to 8 minutes that he needs to really get this team in pace. And That's a little bit ironic, but that is the key. And playing alongside a guy in Tyrese Haliburton, it hasn't been that fluid, right? That's why Mathurin comes off the bench with this unit, and that's why Nisa starts. It's easier for Haliburton to have the ball in his hands, be that playmaker, and look for a guy on the wing in a guy in Aaron Nesmith for a catch-and-shoot three, rather than a guy in Benedict Mathurin who's going to catch the ball, stall, and try to create his own iso little shot, delaying the basically play that Tyrese Haliburton created. That's why they kind of split some things, and that's why kind of gating into this season, I kind of considered the Pacers trading Benedict Mathurin as a little bit of a higher role going into the season if Haliburton was healthy. The reason why is I felt that with though having the ability of pick 26, pick 28, and pick in 2030, you could use that alongside a player in Benedict Mathurin to go out and get a superstar-esque type player, or maybe a player making $20 to $30 million that could be that high-level impact player, slotting in right to your rotation alongside Haliburton, alongside Pascal Siakam, alongside Miles Turner, to once again take you over the top and put you into those upper echelon conversations in the Eastern Conference. But now that Tyrese Haliburton is going to be out for the entire season, I don't necessarily know if this is the way that the Pacers should really try to handle things. I think a guy like Benedict Mathurin should be back. It should be looked at on his rookie extension contract, and the Pacers should try to get this deal done before he becomes a restricted free agent, because this season is going to be the leap of Benedict Mathurin. Like I mentioned, with Tyrese Haliburton playing alongside Benedict Mathurin, it was very difficult for them both to create their own shot, to kind of run the offense, and that's why Mathurin was kind of gifted as that sixth man and was playing with the secondary unit. Now with Tyrese Haliburton being out, Benedict Mathurin is going to be that number one creator for this team, and Mathurin is going to showcase not only his ability to be a slasher, to be a scorer, to be a guy that can help and be an athletic finisher at the rim, but he's going to help prove to teams out there on the open market that he can be a star-studded piece that they keep an eye on. And I think kind of dating into the next season, after when Tyrese Haliburton comes back, that's when the Indiana Pacers are really going to gauge what they decide to do with the guy in Benedict Mathurin. Because if he's on a tradable contract, right, similar of a contract like a Jalen Green, where he's making like $30 million, or an Alperen Sengun, similar around there, one that the Rockets gave to those two guys this past season. I think a guy like Benedict Mathurin, kind of in a similar situation like the Rockets were with Jalen Green this offseason, will be presented into one with a guy like Benedict Mathurin, and I think there will be plenty of teams that view Benedict Mathurin as a complementary piece to the young core. But not only that, there'll be teams that think that this guy can really help us in being that number one guy, and we're going to go out and go get him. And then I already kind of prefaced it here, but when diving into free agency, not looking at players that I think they could trade, the main one to talk about is Miles Turner. I think he'll be back. Once again, 10-year NBA veteran. All these years have spent with the Indiana Pacers after being at multiple trade rumors across these last couple seasons, involved in basically every team around the league. It just makes sense for him to stay home. The team that drafted him, the team that felt full confidence in him, the team that never gave up on Miles Turner and always believed in him, even when they had options to do so, finally got what he deserved with the team that he stuck with all along. He deserves this payday. He's going to get that payday. And Miles Turner is a very, very underrated big. I know at some points he obviously doesn't look the greatest on the offensive side of the ball, as he can be a little bit inconsistent, especially in these playoffs and in the finals. We did see it. But I do love me some Miles Turner, man. He is very underrated, and I think complements this Pacers team and what they need so much. And if they ultimately did lose him, I think it would be a big detriment to their core. And yeah, that's basically it. When looking at other free agents, obviously Thomas Bryant, maybe they consider Tony Bradley on a team option, James Johnson. These guys are a little bit older, so if they are going to be brought back, if they do not retire, they most likely could be brought back to this Pacers team, or maybe they just go be another veteran contract on another squad. Isaiah Jackson is also one to keep an eye on. He obviously dealt with some injuries this season. Let's see if he's going to be brought back, and if he is brought back, what potential he could bring for this Pacers squad. And that also, still makes it a little bit more wonky for Jarris Walker and Obi Toppin. So definitely within that front court, especially if Siakam and Miles Turner here. So a little bit weird. No draft picks for the Pacers. Like I mentioned, they did have pick 23, but they did trade that alongside the rights of someone that they did have, who I'm blanking on the name of, to the New Orleans Pelicans, like I mentioned, for their 2026 first round pick back. That trade was involved in the Siakam deal sent to Toronto, and then Toronto sent it to New Orleans in exchange for Brandon Ingram. The Pacers basically just trade their first-round pick this season so they can stay underneath the luxury tax a little bit, have some more money for Miles Turner. They don't need another Johnny Furphy contract to be brought in, and they have now the flexibility to trade picks in 26, 28, and 2030, and also for them now having Tyrese Halliburton being out for the next season, this is also a little bit helpful because now in 2026, if they're not the greatest team and they do fall into the lottery or things do go wrong, well, guess what? They have their first round pick and it's not a wash of a season. They don't have to trade for it back. They don't have to worry about not wanting to tank. Things can go a little bit easier for the Pacers if that's the decision that they decide to go. So once again, let me know your thoughts on the Indiana Pacers. I think they were a fantastic story this season. As much as the Oklahoma City Thunder deserved the NBA championship because they were the best team, the Indiana Pacers proved me wrong, proved the entire league wrong, and desperately deserved what they got to. 25 years, obviously, a long time for the Indiana Pacers to be back into that spot. And even though it wasn't the cherry on the top with them crowning and winning an NBA championship, if you're a Pacers fan, you should be proud of the season that you had and definitely believe it in these guys, even with Tyrese Halliburton being out next season, that they can still compete and still be a great quality team in this Eastern Conference. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Once again, this is the second to last offseason breakdown, so if you definitely want to check out some other teams, look at the playlist. Definitely check those out on YouTube. If not, definitely be staying up to date here on the channel as we'll have the Thunder one dropping tomorrow. And then after that, with Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the news coming out about potential other trades, the draft, free agency. We're going to have a bunch of videos going over everything related to NBA here on the channel. So if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.